What up, nail people and nail lovers everywhere? My name is Sandra, and welcome to my first ever tutorial. So let's get right into it. We're going to be drawing or painting a pumpkin today. We're starting off with this orange color called Pumpkin Palace from Madam Glam. I'm going to be using two different tones of orange. So I'm going to be mixing two colors together to get the tones that I need. So I'm going to get this other color from Madam Glam in a minute or in a second. It's called Blood Orange, and I'm going to put those colors on my palette, and I'm going to go ahead and mix them together so that I could have one brighter tone and one more deeper or darker tone, because we're going to be painting the pumpkin with some shadowing and some highlights so that it can give it a somewhat more realistic, or I wouldn't necessarily say 3D-ish, but I guess, yeah, more realistic effect on the nail versus just a flat looking pumpkin. And then I'm also going to be taking two different tones of green to make the stem. So the first color was from Gaudy Nails called It's Your Lucky Day, and this color is from Light Elegance P Plus line called Worth Waiting For. So we're going to start by prepping our tip with some Manicure Base from Young Nails. I decided to use a tip because I just really wasn't feeling the having to sculpt the nail on my practice hand just to show this tutorial, but hopefully in the future you guys will be seeing me sculpt some nails on a practice hand or maybe even on a real person. I am not a licensed professional yet, but I have been DIYing for many years now. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. Next, we're going to go in with two coats of our base color or our background color on the tip, which is from Nail Reserve, and it's called Naked and Famous. It's a funny name. This is very soft, like toned down yellowish color, and it contrasts really good against the orange and green of the pumpkin. You can use, any background color that you want. Just try to make it a color that will contrast well and it won't overpower the other colors. So I'm doing two very thin coats. I've noticed that with the Nail Reserve colors that I've used, and I like their line. I have a few of their polishes, but I believe they're HEMA free and they're very clean. They're like 21 free or 9 free, one of those. And so their polishes tend to be a little on the thicker side. So do two thin coats to get, I did two thin coats, sorry, to get the right opacity. And then each layer I cured for a full 60 seconds, excuse me, in the light. And I do have the Light Elegance dot light LED lots. So then now we're going to go in and start painting the pumpkin. I'm using my micro detailer, I believe, from Young Nails. And I'm picking up some of that lighter or brighter orange. And we're going to be making like the top part of a heart, like the two little humps of a heart. You don't have to connect them. You can if you want to, but, we are going to be painting it in. So you don't have to connect them just yet. Or at all, really. So we're going to do that. And then once we have the two humps of the heart drawn, then we're going to go ahead and draw like an arch connecting the two humps, like over the two humps, connecting them as you see here. Then I'm grabbing my my absolute favorite brushes, which is from the brand Attain. And this is their gel brush. Attain is a line from Liz Morris of the Nail Hub. She came up with a hypoallergenic line of polishes and like base coats and top coats, and she has these brushes that are amazing, you guys. The quality of these brushes for the price that she has them for is to die for. I mean, the brushes are each $9, her gel brush and her liner brush, and I find that these are probably the best brushes that I've used. Have yet to try the Light Elegance brushes, which I'm sure I will probably fall in love with because, Liz works very closely with Jimmy from Light Elegance. And so her products are just as good a quality as theirs. But anyways, enough about the brushes. Took a little side tour there, little detour. I'm going in with two thin layers of the orange just to make sure that I have a good enough opacity for the pumpkin. The first layer, I did it very thinly and I just flash cured it quickly. I didn't put it in the full size lamp. And then I went in with the second thin layer. And then once I had that layer on there, I went ahead and I put the pumpkin in the full size lamp so that it can cure fully. Then we're going in with the same micro detailer brush from Young Nails, and I'm picking up the more muted or the more toned down orange, and we're going to start drawing our contours of the pumpkin. So basically you're going to imagine where the contours or the ridges of the pumpkin, where you want them to be, and then you're going to take your deeper orange and you're just going to start drawing on those shadows. So it's almost like you're drawing a line. Well, you are drawing a line, but you're drawing them where you want those contours to be so that it can give you the shadowing, the contours, the contrast of the pumpkin. And then later on, we'll be drawing on the highlights of the pumpkin, and then it'll all just come together. And it's so amazing how you start off with a shape that looks like a blob and then it turns into some something artistic at the end. So right now I'm just doing that. You can do either 5 or 7 or however many contours you want your pumpkin to have, depending on the size of the nail, depending on the size of your pumpkin. You choose, but just however you want to do it. And then I'm going to take this 3D acrylic flower brush that I don't use for acrylic flowers, and I'm going to start just kind of tapping away at those lines to kind of fade them out and not make them look so harsh. You don't want to have harsh lines. You want it to look like a fade because we're doing some shadowing. So similar to how you would shadow on a piece of paper with a pencil, you go from, a lot of pressure to very little pressure so that it can fade. You want to do the same thing here with those lines. Then we're going to go in and start, once that's done, you're going to go ahead and cure. And you're going to do it before the gel cures on the shadows of the pumpkin or the contours of the pumpkins. Before the gel cures, you go in with another brush and you just kind of fade those lines. So now we are painting on the stem of the pumpkin. I showed you the buttercream from Light Elegance in the same color as the P+, which is worth waiting for because I felt like the mixture I made with the P+ and the Gaudy color was a little bit runny. And so I just added a little bit of that buttercream to try to thicken it up a little bit so that the color wouldn't bleed out too much because I totally had forgot to put down a matte top coat before I started painting my pumpkin. You don't have to do that. I personally like to paint on top of a matte top coat because I feel like the brushes glide a lot better. Even though I did wipe my sticky layer off before I started painting the pumpkin, it just, with the matte top coat, the brushes just tend to glide so much easier. So, side note on that as well. If you're watching this video and you're trying to attempt this look, before you start painting your pumpkin, either buff it with a 180 buffer and get it, like take the shine off, or put a matte top coat on. It'll make your painting a lot easier. So anyways, here I am. I'm just drawing a basic little stem on a pumpkin. At the base of the stem, where the stem meets the pumpkin, you want to do kind of like semicircles at the bottom just to give it that kind of, look like it's a root coming from the pumpkin. And then at the top of the stem, I like to top it off with a half circle or like a little dome because when we do our shading, it'll add a nice little dimension at the top of of the stem. So we're going in with our lighter or brighter tone of green. We're drawing our pumpkin stem, and then I'm going to just flash cure it because I mean it's just a little tiny stem. I don't feel the need that to have it go in the light just yet. So once I paint on the once I paint on the shadows, then I'll go ahead and stick it in the light for a full 60 seconds. So right now that's what I'm doing. I'm just grabbing some of those darker tones of green and I'm just adding a little shadowing along the spine or the back part of the stem, and then right underneath that dome I'm doing a little slanted line to give it that kind of dimension to make it look a little bit more realistic. I mean, you know, I'm not the best drawer. As you can see, I'm not the best painter. Drawing on a piece of paper is so much easier for me than drawing with gel polish. But here we are, okay? We are no quitters. We are giving it a shot, and I'm sharing with you what I've learned and how I did it because I figured if I can take this and make it look halfway decent, then there's going to be somebody out there who can draw or paint way better than me on a nail, and they're going to run with it and make it look like legit realistic. So, anyways, once we are done with the stem, we're going to go ahead and start drawing the little loop-de-loop swirly little stemmy root thingy that comes out of the pumpkin that we all love, that just gives it such a cute little look. So I don't know about you guys, but I definitely struggle trying to do circles with a gel brush and polish. I don't know how some of these people that I see online can do a circle like they're drawing with a pencil. I totally can't. And I think I know my problem is that I was holding the brush at an angle instead of straight up and down. I think if I would have held it straight up and down like I did with the lines on the white lines on the pumpkin, it probably would have not been such a struggle. But anyways, so then I go in ahead and I draw like another little stemmy thing, and then I flash cure it. And then now I'm grabbing my Madam Glam white gel paint. I think that's what it's called. I don't know if it's gel art paint or gel paint, but anyways, the little potted paint. And then I'm taking my Attain liner brush and I am using the very tippity tip of the brush. As you can see, I only have paint on the tip of the brush and I'm putting the slightest amount of paint or polish on there, and I'm using the slightest amount of pressure. You don't want to use too much pressure when you're drawing these lines because, as you know, the more pressure you apply when you're using your liner brush, the thicker the lines will be. And even still, I felt like my lines were a little bit on the thick side, and I think it wasn't the amount of pressure I used because I was using very little pressure, but I think I might have had a little too much paint polish on there. But you want to use just the very little tip of your brush, and you don't really want to use it at an angle because when you use your brush, see, like on that line there, I used it at an angle and I pulled way too much color on that line, and I felt like that line came out extremely thick. But I don't know, I wasn't about to go in and take it off and do it all over again. So we just left it like that because, hey, nobody's perfect and neither are pumpkins. And we love imperfect things, especially pumpkins. And so you're going to go ahead and draw your highlights over where the shadowing, you don't want to, I don't know how to explain it. You don't want to draw on top of your shadowing. In other words, like in the middle of your shadowing. You want to go above where the shadowing is. So you'll have your highlight, and then underneath the highlight, you'll have your shadowing. And you're just going to basically trace over all of that shadowing because remember, we want to try to give it dimension. So you're going to have your highlights and your contours, just like when we do makeup. We want to have highlights and contours so that we give our face some dimension. You know, the highlights is where you want to see less. I'm sorry, the contours is where you want to see less, and the highlights is where you want to bring things out. So we want to bring out those ridges of the pumpkin, and then the shadowing that we did, we're going to make it look deeper or make it look less, if that makes sense. I'm sure it does. So then I went ahead and I did my little highlights on the stem and on the little loop-de-loop, and then I cured it, and then I went back in with some more of that deeper orange to try to give it a little more shadowing, because when I mixed the oranges, I didn't get the right ratio of colors, and so my tone of that deeper orange wasn't quite right. It wasn't quite there. So I tried to go back in, but it really didn't do much, because again, the color of the deeper tone orange and the orange that I used for the background or for the base of the pumpkin were very similar. So you couldn't really see too much of a contrast between the two. But I was not about to start over. So I just left it like that, because you know what? Like I said, I ain't perfect. Nobody's perfect, and neither are pumpkins. So anyways, once that I was done with that, I went ahead and I gave it another coat of the matte top coat, and I cured it for a full 60 seconds. You could do shiny if you want. I just feel like when you're doing these kind of shading and shadowing on nails, a matte top coat for some reason just makes it look a little more realistic. But if you're into shiny top coat, you can do that. That's fine. And then now I'm bringing out my Young Nails gloss gel, because now we're going to add a little something to give it, to just kind of finish off the look. At least in my opinion, you don't have to do this. So I'm taking a dotting tool and that gloss, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a little bit of dewdrops, kind of like if you went out into a pumpkin patch in the morning and you picked a little baby pumpkin, and that little baby pumpkin had some dewdrops on it. So that's what we're doing here. And that's also why I use the matte top coat, because I feel like the contrast between the matte top coat and the shiny of the dewdrops just kind of brings it all together. So that's what I'm doing. Now I did a practice nail last night on a stiletto, and I kind of wish I would have left at least one of them without the dewdrops, but hey, it is what it is. So here are my two pumpkins on two different shaped nails, one stiletto, one coffin. These are the products that I use. This is the final look. If you guys think that you can pull it off, and I'm sure you can. This is a very super easy design. Anybody can do it. And it looks super, super cute. I mean, I would love to see somebody walk around with this design on their nails. Anyways, thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. This is my first ever YouTube video, so if you don't mind giving it a like and a subscribe, I would truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.